Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. 3 keepers, 1 night, no explanation. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. On December 26, 1900, the relief boat Hesperus arrived at the Flannan Isles Lighthouse off the Scottish coast and found the lighthouse abandoned. 3 experienced lighthouse keepers, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, had vanished without a trace. A meal lay half-eaten on the table. The clock had stopped. No bodies were ever found. The half-eaten meal is a myth. A 1912 poem embedded it permanently in the story, and it has never left. The clock that stopped is also disputed. What is real is this: 3 experienced men, in one of the most isolated lighthouses in Britain, disappeared between December 15 and December 26, 1900, leaving behind 1 set of oilskins and log entries describing something that had terrified them for days before they vanished. The official inquiry concluded they were swept off a cliff by a rogue wave. Almost no one finds that entirely satisfying. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the world of history's most enduring unsolved crimes, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Every unsolved crime is a failure, not just of the investigation, but of memory itself. The witness who might have placed the suspect at the scene has died. The physical evidence has degraded or been lost in a storage room. The lead detective retired 30 years ago. The files exist, but the institutional knowledge that made them legible is gone. Cold cases are, in a very literal sense, history events that have receded from the living present into the documentary past, accessible now only through records, artifacts, and the unreliable memories of survivors. And yet cold cases do get solved. The history of forensic science is partly a history of cold case resolution. Cases that sat dormant for decades until a new technology, DNA profiling, digital facial recognition, isotope ratio analysis, genealogical databases, provided the key that previous generations lacked. The Golden State Killer was identified 50 years after his first known crime by genealogical DNA matching. Multiple historic murders have been solved through mitochondrial DNA extracted from hair samples thought to be too old and degraded to yield any useful information. The past is not as sealed as it seems. What cold cases teach us about crime is often as important as solving them. They expose the limitations of investigative practice at their time, the tunnel vision that focused on the wrong suspect, the forensic contamination that destroyed evidence, the jurisdictional rivalry that prevented agencies from sharing information. Examining cold cases is an act of institutional self-examination, an attempt to learn, across decades, from the failures that allowed the perpetrator to walk free. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. 3 keepers, 1 night, no explanation is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse stands on the largest of the remote Flannan Isles in the Outer Hebrides, off the northwest coast of Scotland. It had been in operation for less than a year when the three keepers disappeared. The lighthouse was considered an isolated but not unusually dangerous posting. The keepers were experienced. Principal keeper James Ducat had served for years. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the relief steamer Hesperus arrived on December 26, 1900, delayed by storms, and found the lighthouse light extinguished and no keeper visible. Relief keeper Joseph Moore landed and found the lighthouse interior in order. Beds made, dishes clean, the clock wound. No half-eaten meal was on the table. That detail was introduced in Wilfred Wilson Gibson's 1912 poem Flannan Isle and has been misreported as fact ever since. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine the log entries found in the lighthouse record increasingly disturbing conditions. Entries by Thomas Marshall for December 12 describe severe winds and note that Ducat was very quiet and MacArthur was crying. December 13 records the storm continuing and the men in apparent distress. The final entry is dated December 15. The next day the storm broke. What happened in those days is unknown. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, one set of oilskins remained in the lighthouse, identified as Donald MacArthur's. The oilskins were the standard protective gear keepers wore outside in bad weather. That MacArthur went out without his suggests he left in a sudden emergency, without time to dress properly. This detail was central to the official investigation's conclusion. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of Superintendent Robert Muirhead conducted the official investigation. He found that the west landing crane had been moved from its storage position and its ropes had been entangled, and that iron railings had been bent and displaced by wave action. Muirhead concluded a massive wave event had struck the west landing while the keepers were working there, sweeping all three into the sea. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: no bodies from the Flannan Isles disappearance were ever recovered from the sea around the Isla NDS or adjacent Scottish coastline. This is not unusual for drownings in the waters west of the Outer Hebrides, where strong currents move bodies rapidly away from shore. The lighthouse was later automated and continues to operate. The islands are accessible by boat and are visited by researchers and tourists. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. we are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. 3 keepers, 1 night, no explanation. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the rogue wave conclusion, Muirhead's official verdict, holds that one or more exceptionally large waves struck the West Landing while Ducat and Marshall were securing equipment. And MacArthur ran out wits, howed his oilskins to help them, and was also swept away. The physical evidence of displaced ironwork and entangled ropes is consistent with extreme wave action. Critics note the weather log shows the storm had broken by December 14 before the last entry. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that an argument between the men, possibly arising from the prolonged stress documented in the log entries, led to violence and the disposal of a body, followed by the remaining men jumping or being swept into the sea. This theory has no evidentiary support and is purely speculative, but the log's descriptions of emotional distress have kept it in circulation. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that a single keeper fell from the cliff while working, and the other 2 attempted to save him and were themselves swept away. A chain accident triggered by one man's fall. This variant of the rogue wave theory accommodates the missing oilskins and the apparent emergency departure without requiring the simultaneous presence of all 3 men at the wave-exposed location. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, 3 keepers, 1 night, no explanation does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes Muirhead's investigation report, the primary official document, identified physical damage to the West Landing consistent with extreme wave action, displaced crane, bent iron railings, and ropes torn from their storage positions. This damage was not present at the East Landing, suggesting a directional wave event rather than a general storm surge. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains, The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. Marshall's log entries for December 12-13 are the most haunting surviving evidence. Description of experienced men, including a principal keeper of many years, weeping and silent, suggests conditions of extreme psychological stress, which may indicate awareness of a danger they could not control or communicate. The entries have been cited as evidence both for supernatural theories and for the simple terror of prolonged violent storms in an isolated location. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the absence of MacArthur's oilskins inside the lighthouse is the single most consistent physical detail across all accounts, corroborated by Moore's first-hand report. It rules out the scenario in which all three men left together in an orderly fashion and supports an emergency departure. It does not specify what the emergency was. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. 3 keepers, 1 night, no explanation. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Muirhead's Rogue Wave conclusion remains the official verdict of the Northern Lighthouse Board. Wilfred Wilson Gibson's 1912 poem cemented the half-eaten meal and stopped Clark as permanent features of the story in public consciousness. Neither has primary source support. The lighthouse is automated and still operating. No new physical evidence has emerged in over a century. The case is closed. The 3 men have never been found. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. 3 keepers, 1 night, no explanation, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Flannan Isles ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.